Discuss further. We're now joined by the editor of Tech Central, Duncan McLeod. Great to have you with us, Duncan. Let's start with what some of the analysts are saying. You know, this company still fundamentally in good shape. Perhaps it's the biggest telecoms provider on the continent, but we still don't know about the negotiations, do we? And that is crucial.
The share price enjoyed a bit of a bounce up today, but I think it was largely on speculation, perhaps some relief around the fact that their operating license in Nigeria has been extended to 2021. But the company hasn't said anything at all about the state of these negotiations that are happening in Nigeria. They just say that they're happening at a high level with Nigerian authorities. We don't know if that involves the politicians. We presume they involve the Nigerian Communications Commission, which levied the fine in the first place. But we've got no real insight into whether MTN is making any progress in having the size of that fine reduced. I would imagine that the fact that there's been this long delay is probably positive. They probably would have come out quite quickly if the Nigerian government simply came out and told them there is no discussion or no negotiation around this issue. So the fact that it's taking time is probably positive for the company.
In a crisis, companies need to talk. I think, and many people would agree with me, MTN has been amiss in not explaining enough. Maybe it has to be careful around the negotiations, but there are a whole lot of other burning questions it hasn't answered. It has started talking after the close of markets, 2 cent statements. Just tell me a bit about that and what you read into them.
Just a few minutes ago, actually, they've put out 2 cent statements. The first one is just to confirm that the MTN Zakhele Black Economic Empowerment Scheme is going to go ahead with its listing on Thursday this week. There was some concern that perhaps that wasn't going to happen in light of everything that's been going on. And then the other one, which I think read more as a sort of a PR statement and a positioning statement for MTN, which they stated, I'm paraphrasing very loosely here, they said that they're committed to all the markets in which they operate and to emerging markets generally, and they believe in corporate governance and they follow the rules very carefully. So I think it was perhaps a positioning statement, perhaps a bit of PR aimed at the Nigerians more than anything else. Because
that relationship seems to be in tatters, so maybe trying to repair that relationship a little bit.
Well, Chris Maroleng is the communications head for the MTN Group, has been saying today that in fact their relations with the Nigerian regulator are actually fairly good. He was saying that on the back of the renewal of the license today. So perhaps they're suggesting that this is simply the regulator has simply decided to follow the letter of the law, the letter of the regulations rather, and impose the fine that is called for under the regulations.
Do you believe him? Should we be happy that MTN isn't being kicked out of Nigeria? It now seems certain that Nigerian authorities want MTN in the country at least.
Yeah, I guess that is a positive. Although I couldn't ever see Nigeria kicking MTN out of Nigeria. I mean, it's the biggest operator there. They've got more than half the market. Logistically, kicking out a company that pays a huge amount of tax in that country would be difficult indeed. I think that the Nigerians probably erred by, with the size of this fine. It doesn't make any sense. It's the biggest fine that's ever been levied in the telecommunications industry in Africa and possibly in the world. And I think that, I think the negotiation that's clearly happening behind the scenes is probably going to lead to some sort of positive outcome for MTN.
Okay, so possibly designed for effect, for an initial shock, it may come down. But MTN must have infuriated somebody. And besides the statement, have they actually given any sort of explanation as to why they did not follow the law?
They haven't said a thing about that. I presume
and they haven't apologised either.
No, I'm sure this will all come out in the post-mortem, but there's no doubt that MTN hasn't had a great relationship with the regulator in Nigeria, given that they're currently investigating something along the order of 28 infractions against the company. The regulator and MTN have had a difficult situation there. But the regulator is quite tough. It's I think a lot tougher than South Africa's ICASA, and they've come out quite heavily against not only MTN but some of the other players in that market as well over the years, preventing MTN and others, for example, from selling new SIM cards until they sort out their network quality, or advertising their services until they do certain things. So they're a fairly tough regulator. It's not the sort of regulator we used to hear in the South African context, that's for sure.
Okay, so the share price, like you said, rising, but it's still relatively, in fact, it's hugely down compared to the pre-crisis period. What's going on there? Do you think there's still massive concern because of these negotiations, because of the relationship, because there's still no real explanation from this company?
There's no doubt about it. I mean, MTN I think was trading above 190 rand when this all started. Today it had a nice bounce. It was up 5%. Most of that adding just in the final hour of trading, ending around 155 rand, or up about 5%. But it's still way off where it was. And I think until we've got clarity from the company on exactly how much it's going to have to pay the Nigerian Communications Commission, I think there's going to be a lot of speculation, a lot of concern among investors, and I don't think we're going to see it shooting all the way back up to 190.
So what does this mean for those Zakhele shareholders for the listing on Wednesday?
Well, in the insert before we started speaking, I think Sasha Narishkin from Vestac made a good point. He said, you hold this thing for the long term. It's still fundamentally a good company. They've got a temporary problem in Nigeria. Even if they have to pay a large portion of that fine, in the longer term, MTN is probably still a good buy. The Nigerian operation is hugely profitable for MTN. Their metrics are pointing in the right direction. They've sorted out a lot of the problems they've had in recent years here in South Africa. They're selling a lot more data than they used to. So I think they're generally heading in the right direction. And it's a well-run company, and its long-term prospects, despite what's happening this week, are probably still good.
Okay, so no matter what happens with the fine, you believe that MTN can recover and get stronger in future?
I mean, if the full fine is imposed, then there's going to be short-term downside to the MTN share price. If that fine is reduced to 10% of what the NCC is proposing, then the share price is probably going to shoot right back up again.
All right. Hopefully MTN learns from all of this, though. Thank you for your analysis. Duncan McLeod, editor of Tech Central. This is a huge drain on the fiscus. We know the Public Service Commission